morning, and welcome into another edition of Big Talk, college sports from a Midwest perspective, blue collar and blue blood. I'm Dalton Shetler alongside my partner, Sam Sprunger. Sam, how we doing?
Well, it's always great because it's the weekend coming up. I mean, whenever we do a show, it's always the weekend, so it's always a great day.
Good vibes.
But like I've got to get in. I'm in my pre-season workout mode. That doesn't mean I'm active. Don't think that I'm exercising my brain is what I'm doing.
Yeah, Sam and I were talking before we actually started rolling on this. Things are starting to slow down just a little bit in the sports calendar, where the Big Ten's kind of coming to a crashing halt. With the NFL draft having come and gone, we kind of look for the little sprinkles of news that we'll get into with the locations for Big Ten conference games. We find out who's going to be playing who at whose place. We don't know when, but we know who's playing who. And at this point, that's enough to satisfy a little bit of a hunger that we have.
I'm still waiting for Purdue to get to the West, like the Southern California West Coast, so I can try to get credentials to go cover the game there. Oh,
not a bad idea.
Honey, sorry, I've got to go cover the Boilermakers.
I have to be in LA. Duty calls.
Have to. And if you play your cards right, they'll probably have you on the same swing if you're going to both places at the during the season. They probably are going to limit how many times you have to travel out there, like they will for the West Coast teams coming this way. But
that's true. It's true. Well, I tell you what, since this seems to be the area that I think both of us are most interested in, out of this last week, why don't we go ahead and start here? Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the homes and aways and the two plays. Now, remember, Big Ten plays a 20-game conference schedule. Now, with the influx of West Coast teams, there are 18 teams. So the math basically singles down to you play 17 teams once and then 3 teams twice, and that gets you your 20 games. So, wait, that didn't quite work, right? Did it work?
Well, you're absolutely right. There are 3 teams you play twice, and the rest of them you only play once. Just half, it varies on how many you're playing at home and how many you're playing on the road.
So I said 17 you play once. It's 14 teams you play once.
Yes.
3 teams you play twice. That's the math.
One team of the 18. You don't play yourself.
Rolling out of bed here. I'm a little rusty apparently. But yeah, so 14 teams you play once, 3 teams you'll play twice. So I'm thinking maybe the best way to do this, Sam, is to start with the influx of those West Coast teams, and we'll kind of go through their homes and aways, because that will – I think we have a lot of people who are interested in maybe the other 14, and they're kind of curious maybe when they go there, and this might be the best way to get there. You know what I mean? The most efficient way to find it out. So let's start with Oregon. Teams that will be going to Oregon this year: Illinois, Indiana, Maryland, Nebraska, Northwestern, Purdue, and Rutgers. Teams that will host Oregon: Iowa, Michigan, Michigan State, Minnesota, Ohio State, Penn State, Wisconsin. So that's the list for Oregon. And in the 2 plays, it's the rest of those West Coast teams. So UCLA, USC, Washington. Oregon will play twice.
Are we to assume that that's going to be the case for most of the or every year for those 4 teams out there, that they're going to be the 2 plays that they play each other twice?
That at least makes the most sense. I would ride that assumption for now. That's in my head for now.
I would think, because then it's like, okay, they don't have to, like, I don't know. I mean, it really doesn't make a difference. I mean, I guess, but it would just, to me, make the most sense that you kind of keep your rivals in, because those are the natural rivals, if they're going to have any, inside the Big Ten. So
and the best you can help with the travel plans, like that helps the best.
And we're not playing football here, so football doesn't have home and away. You don't play your teams twice. So the travel when it comes to football is completely different than it is for basketball and other sports.
That's why football should be treated as its own thing and so different than any other sport, so we're not trying to fit these circles and square holes.
But I do believe it's the Ohio State offensive coordinator at this point now had that suggestion when he was at UCLA. right?
Yeah,
Chip
yeah.
Kelly suggested that football be held separately, and you just divide it into subdivisions and let the rest of college sports be college sports.
And he's not alone. I mean, the Knight Commission has really been kind of beating on that drum here recently with their response to the NCAA's Project D1 proposal.
Mhm.
Because, look, there is a glaring issue here, too, besides the fact that we're trying to conform every sport to follow football, which just doesn't make sense. And,
That's
like,
the square
uh,
peg into a round hole.
yeah, until we just accept the reality that football is a different beast and
Mhm.
the logistics of it, where there's just 12 games, 5 road games is different than playing 15 road games in a season. Go ahead, Sam.
I know we're getting sidetracked from the basketball schedule, but
Yeah, yeah,
like I
yeah.
texted you a couple weeks ago with a picture of the Big Ten champion Johns Hopkins lacrosse team. Okay,
Right.
or the hockey Notre Dame is part of the Big Ten college hockey conference. Why is it that all of a sudden now, like with these major sports, I understand basketball is a major sport, but why are we trying, like you said, trying to force every conference into what the football conference should look like? I don't care if the Big Ten has 48 teams for football, because like we said, football makes so much money that the travel and logistics of that is more feasible. But for a women's college tennis team, why is UCLA traveling to Rutgers? And
Correct.
why can't you keep the tennis conference as the Pac-12? The Pac-12 could still exist. It just wouldn't have a football aspect. The Big East operates just fine that way. Why is it and is it completely just the money? Because honestly, tennis, I'm sure, is not making the same amount of money as football. I'm just saying.
Well, and that's the thing, though, Sam. Like you asked the natural question, and that's a question that I've been asking for a year. I just think everybody's so conformed to the framework and making sure that there's not inequities between sports, and everybody puts such like a hamper on that. Like, well, if we do this with football, we have to try and do this with. Like, I think everybody's stuck in that frame of mind, in that mode, where they just aren't embracing the reality of, hey, football is different, and really, what you're doing is you're hurting the other sports by making it tag along with football. Like football could still get its money. People are going to watch no matter what, and you could split that pie however you want. Between the Big Ten and SEC, sure, it makes sense. But yeah, like there's just a lack of willingness to embrace the reality that football's so much different and needs to be treated different. And if it were approached that way, I believe, I mean, many of these Olympic sports not only could maybe be saved from extinction, where I think some of them are really going to struggle in the new mode, and I think some athletic departments are just going to flat out cut some of those sports from their athletic programs. But I mean, also you would make their lives easier. You'd make the lifestyle easier. Like, I mean, we just saw Tara Vanderveer retire, the Stanford women's basketball head coach, and maybe it was coming up either way because she's had a pretty long, great, successful career. But flying from Stanford to Miami to NC State to
Boston
Boston College
College.
to whatever, joining the ACC, like it's just it's a tougher lifestyle, and we can make this all easier if we just thought about it a little bit differently.
Well, my question, and I'm going to go off your hat, is Michigan State golf really worried about whether or not they get to go play out in LA? I mean, don't get me wrong. The thought is, ooh, we get to play in LA, but is it really that I'm going to go to Michigan State and play golf because they get to go to UCLA? Or like and you're right, there's going to be, especially some of the lower rung sports, that are the universities are going to go, you know what, this is just not feasible. We're not going to have women's field hockey and men's water polo or whatever. Those
Yep.
those absolutely do not make any money whatsoever. They're reliant on the university, and because they're just not going to do it. They save money then on scholarships, they save money on then travel, they save money here, they save money here. It's all about the dollars. So
Yep.
yeah, great, you're making millions upon millions hand over fist with football, but you're killing other sports because of it. Your university is still going to make millions upon millions for football, even if it's its own entity and in a completely and overtly different conference than the rest of your sports.
Because eyeballs wouldn't go anywhere if football was different. Like nobody really get right now. It's not really even an NCAA sport. That's the craziest thing, Sam. And this is really what the Night Commission gets into. I mean, look, the championship is hosted by the College Football Playoff. I don't think everybody realizes the College Football Playoff is a separate entity from the NCAA. So the NCAA right now goes through the entire year where they're trying to be the governing body of college football, right? They're trying to handle situations like with the University of Michigan last year. They're taking responsibility for all the different liabilities. They're paying the health insurance. They're paying all the safety things. They're doing all of that, assuming all the responsibility. But then they get to the championship season, and the NCAA makes $0 on football in the college football playoff because that's a separate entity that's kind of ran and formed by the conference commissioners. Like, what's the point for the NCAA to be still trying to govern this sport where they're making zero money off of it? If that's how everybody wants to go is with the college football playoff where it's all the revenue, fine. They can have it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, why is the NCAA still assuming that responsibility? I think it would be healthier for the sport, again, if they cut that ties with that and allow, if college football playoff is going to make all the money from this, then they should be assuming responsibility for this or outsource it to somebody else, something. But for the NCAA to try to do that and then still kind of linger in some of these other areas, it's just it's a really difficult like two skate method that's just not feasible in the end. And I think ultimately, if it continues down this trajectory, you're going to see Olympic sports cut, and that's such a shame. I mean, that's really like. Look, I know many of us don't go to several of the different Olympic sport events. I do sometimes because work will take me to stuff like that. But I understand, like a lot of us are football fans, we're basketball fans, maybe hockey, whatever else. But the idea of college sports and why we encourage so many young people to get into athletics is for the opportunities, for the lessons, for the experiences. Like everybody remembers what it was like for sports. And imagine you're being told that you've worked your way to a D1 institution, a Big Ten level, SEC level, and your sport's going to get cut. And why? It's because this wasn't really thought about in a different way than what we've known in the past, where we treated football differently. Like it really is such a shame. And I hope everybody's able to empathize with what a shame that situation is.
Well, there's a couple of things that I want to throw into this because you were talking about the college football playoff and the national championship, and all you have to do is look at the logos for each, the Final Four and the college football national championship. You know immediately that it's an NCAA event with the Final Four because their logo's in the middle of the stinking design. It is there. You can't even go on the court with something that is not approved color-wise by the NCAA. The cups you have to take, you can have anything to drink, but it has to be in a certain designed cup. Okay, they have an iron fist. You go to the NCAA or the college football, there's not even an NCAA logo on their logo. So that tells you there's nothing. The NCAA sold their rights off to that. They're making money off of it, but they don't have any rights to it. As for why somebody plays college sports, it sure ain't for the crowds, period.
Well, and hang on, let me just pause you for a moment, Sam, because I do believe the NCAA is not making money.
Oh, they're not even making cash off of it, period?
No.
I thought they sold the rights, and so they made the money initially or something.
From a conversation I had with Night Commission Executive Director Amy Perko, the NCAA gets zero revenue from football.
But how did the CFP get the rights? That's what I'm asking.
I believe those were different conference commissioners forming their own group.
So the conferences did it.
Correct.
Wow.
So the NCAA gets no money.
Okay.
But they're the ones governing this entire sport.
Which is silly.
Exactly. But we've got to find a solution to that. And I don't think everybody understands just the way that structure is.
Right.
Like, I don't think everybody's quite aware. And that seems to be an easier fix. Like, I know there's politics, but look, if I'm the NCAA, question, why are we governing everything and assuming all the medical bills and responsibilities for everything?
Why are we being sued?
Not getting money. Like what? Yeah,
In
but
fairness,
continue, sorry.
in fairness on that one, you dug your own hole. Okay.
No, I mean the NCAA's got plenty of issues, but like as we talk about the
Yeah.
road ahead, like that seems to be one of the
Yep.
solutions. But continue on.
Yeah. Well, as for why a college athlete, not a football player, or even to a certain extent a basketball player, goes to play college sports, it's not for the crowds. Because I
Mhm.
mean, you most, and not all, but most college baseball, even at the D1 high level D1, they don't have huge crowds. They have crowds, but there are the exceptions. The certain conferences and game or teams,
And the
they will have.
Nebraskas.
Yeah, but for the most part, you're going to. I saw a highlight of, and granted it, but it was at Wrigley Field. Purdue and Northwestern played at Wrigley Field, and there were like 45 people there.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's just not a huge draw compared to football and basketball. And that is what it is, but they're not going for, oh, we get to play in front of thousands. That's a sell for football. That's a sell for basketball. It's not a sell for any other college sport. So they're sure not going for the glitz and glamour of being a college athlete. They're going for the experience and for the scholarship to be able to get their education. You're
Yeah.
going to completely cripple some programs and some kids that their only opportunity to get a really good college education is busting their butt to go be a college athlete, to be able to get a scholarship to play lacrosse or to play field hockey or to do this. And it's going to be because we've made these conferences so major that the ACC, the Atlantic Coast Conference, is now the All Coast Conference because they've got West Coast teams in it too. And I'm saying the same thing to knock the Big Ten. They shouldn't be a coast to coast. They shouldn't be a coast to coast conference in all the sports. It just shouldn't be that way. It's not feasible. It doesn't make a ton of sense.
No, I completely agree. And look, you're right. Crowds come to football and basketball. Like on the whole, you're absolutely right. I just felt like the breathing down my neck of Spartan fans saying, "Hey, hockey too, hockey,
Oh,
hockey." So
sure.
like,
There are sports,
and my
and
point
it
wasn't to
varies.
diminish your point.
Yeah.
I'm not even trying to diminish your point. I just could feel the pressure based on this last season of they're like,
Right.
"Hey, we're here, we're here."
Well,
Like
it varies per school. Like the University of
absolutely,
Denver or Denver University or
absolutely.
whatever, they don't get the same basketball crowds as they get for their hockey. So I mean, it varies per. I'm sure Johns Hopkins is the same way with certain sports. Their lacrosse is going to be awesome crowds, and maybe
Correct.
their basketball is not going to be much. It's going to
No,
vary.
totally understood your point. I could feel like the hockey institutions being like, "We're here, we're here."
No, I get it. I get that completely. It
But
just is
so
frustrating.
yeah, I was gonna say, and maybe this is one of the shows later on down the road for Big Talk, where we dive into this a little bit more,
Yeah.
and
Let's
maybe
get
eventually
back
there's.
into the college basketball schedule for next year.
Yeah, it's been 15
we
minutes. Let's
we
circle
got
back
Oregon
in.
in.
Let's go ahead and redo Oregon at this point, just in case we have a new listener
I've
at this point.
forgotten, Dalton.
All right. So the concept, if you weren't with us from the beginning, the Big Ten Conference
If
for
you
men's
have, bless you.
basketball, yeah, right, has announced the home and aways for this upcoming basketball season. Of course, with the 4 new teams coming from the West Coast, we thought maybe the best way for everybody to learn maybe how their team crosses paths with the West Coast teams is just to read the 4 West Coast teams instead of the other 14 teams. So let's start back with Oregon. Oregon this year will host. So teams going out to Oregon will be Illinois, Indiana, Maryland, Nebraska, Northwestern, Purdue, and Rutgers. Teams that will host Oregon will come to your place, will be Iowa, Michigan, Michigan State, Minnesota, Ohio State, Penn State, Wisconsin. And in the home and aways, Oregon's going to play UCLA, USC, Washington. So they
Be
play
careful
each
because
other.
that's how we got on the sidetrack there.
I know. Quickly moving down
yes,
to UCLA.
Next.
So teams that will fly out to UCLA, Iowa, Michigan, Michigan State, Minnesota, Ohio State, Penn State, Wisconsin. Teams that UCLA will go to, and these teams will host UCLA, Illinois, Indiana, Maryland, Nebraska, Northwestern, Rutgers, and Purdue, which the Purdue one's got an interesting tidbit.
Yeah, it's the first time since 2004 that UCLA will play at Mackey Arena against Purdue, because if we remember the COVID or the NCAA tournament that was all in the Indy area, UCLA and Michigan State played at Mackey Arena during.
I don't want to talk about it.
During the opening round, first 4 games, but
the game was won, and UCLA wins it at the end, and it goes to the Final Four.
He is so still bitter. Oh my goodness! I can remember video being sent to me. This is what Mackey looks like in a tournament, and then all of a sudden, crap. He's bitter, folks.
It hurt.
Yeah, give him a virtual hug. Just tell him how much you love him. But no, it'll be the first. Purdue will get the opportunity to beat UCLA at Mackey Arena, I believe, for the first time. I don't think they won in 2004. I think UCLA won that game. But UCLA won the first game ever played at Mackey Arena, so they get Purdue gets a chance to avenge the first ever game that mattered. Let's say it that way.
Also, for the 2 plays for UCLA, it's still that 4 pod. USC. So these are the teams that will fly out to USC this year for men's basketball. It'll be Iowa, Michigan, Michigan State, Minnesota, Ohio State, Penn State, Wisconsin. Teams that will host USC. USC is going to come to your place. Will be Illinois, Indiana, Maryland, Nebraska, Northwestern, Purdue, and Rutgers. So that's the list for USC. For Washington, they're going to host. So these teams will go out to Washington, Illinois, Indiana, Maryland, Nebraska, Northwestern, Purdue, and Rutgers. And teams that will host Washington's coming to your place. Iowa, Michigan, Michigan State, Minnesota, Ohio State, Penn State, Wisconsin. So that's kind of the list with the West Coast.
It sounds like they're taking the same pods and sending them out to either the Great Northwest to play. So Purdue goes to Washington and Oregon. And it sounds like IU, that whole group that goes to Washington, is it the same group that goes to Oregon then as well?
So I just looked because I kind of had that thought too, but I couldn't process it.
Or is it very slightly?
But you're absolutely right. UCLA and USC, it's the exact same list.
They just flip-flop.
Oregon, same list.
Because then Purdue plays host to UCLA and USC, and I think it's the same group that hosts them both. So next year, the year after, they're both going to go, or that pod's going to go out to the southern part of the West Coast, and Michigan State and the likes of your group that you mentioned is going to go to the Great Northwest.
Yep.
Okay.
Which that's actually pretty interesting. It seems like an efficient.
Sounds like divisions to me, folks.
And by the way, since of course I have a Michigan State interest and Sam's got a Purdue interest, I will mention that for Michigan State and Purdue playing each other, Purdue's going to come to East Lansing. There is no return visit. So
kind of like last year, but flip-flopped.
Yeah. So Michigan State doesn't have to go to Purdue or to Indiana, and Spartan fans everywhere can take a.
I was going to say, are you throwing a party that you don't have to go to Mackey?
Oh my God, that place. But so that's how that shakes out on the men's side. We still haven't seen the homes and aways yet for the women.
Right.
I don't believe I've checked.
I haven't seen anything. That doesn't mean that I'm not completely 100% up on it, on everything, but I haven't seen anything yet.
But for folks that may have forgotten, the women, instead of a 20-game schedule, play 18 games in the Big Ten.
Does that mean they're only going to have 1-2 play, like their rival, and then they play everybody else once?
Exactly correct. So they'll play everybody once, but their rival, like for Michigan State's case, they're going to play Michigan twice.
Well, that means Michigan doesn't play Ohio State twice then.
Correct. Okay. But
it's not the same rivalry in basketball, though.
I was going to say, so that's honestly one of the beauties of – that's why, and this could be another show too, because you're a Purdue fan. It was rivalries. The Michigan State-Michigan rivalry, to me, is right there as maybe the best because it has mattered. Michigan got good now, and Michigan State's got a turnaround coming. But It has mattered in football, and it's been intense in football. It's mattered at such a personal level. And in basketball, it really
Right.
means something. Where, like, a lot of these rivalries, they only mean something in one sport. I mean, Indiana, Purdue, like, it means something in football, but
They
it's
play
not
for a
the
bucket.
same.
Come on, man.
You play for the bucket, but,
No, it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of even just the conference. 9 times out of 10.
yeah.
I don't remember when both teams were good enough to be playing for something that mattered other than just the bucket.
No, that's fair. And in, like, Michigan and Ohio State, like, usually honestly, those teams are often both good at the same time too, but it just doesn't carry over the same way to that sport.
Right.
So,
well,
I don't know.
and that's the one thing I was going to say is Purdue, excuse me, their rivalry for football and basketball, it's IU. Whereas Michigan has their rivalry with football, it's Ohio State for Michigan. And if for basketball, it's Michigan State. So their rivalry varies. Like the North Carolina Duke rivalry, it's not as intense for football. You don't see that big of a hype for the UNC Duke football game, but the basketball games get covered on game day.
Correct. Well, the part I would ask you though is, does it just have to be one? Because it's not like Michigan State, Michigan are less intense in football. Like,
no. I'm just saying the rivalry, like the like Purdue has a rivalry with Illinois. Like, I don't like Illinois either, honestly.
Right.
But it's not as intense, let's say it that way, as IU. So I think you can have multiple rivalries. I mean, if you remember back, I mean, you certainly do because you still play it until the new game comes out. But the college football game, they would have rivalry games, and you can pick your rivalry game. You could pick whether it's Purdue IU or Purdue Illinois or Purdue and Notre Dame. They had a rivalry. Like, I'm going off of what I picked. So you had multiple rivalries you could play.
My point just is, like, if you do want to do like tier system of rivals or whatever, and you're saying for Michigan that Michigan State is secondary, which a fair argument. I just would say it's not your typical secondary. Like, it's not.
No, you're right.
It's not a Notre Dame Purdue. It's not like this trumps a lot of teams as just straight out rival. Like, it's really a big deal.
Yep, I agree. I agree completely, and that's an unusuality about it too.
Yeah, agreed. So real quick, before we end up closing out of here in just a minute, I wanted to take a look now that the transfer portal window has closed. That's for football. That's for basketball. I believe Jeff Goodman had tweeted out that the number, here it is. The number of D1 men's basketball players in the portal since they opened on March 18th, the number is 1,882 players in the transfer portal on the men's side, which I believe equates to about 41% of basketball players out there at the D1 level.
So that's 2 out of every 5 on your roster potentially or are in the portal.
That's like 2 out of every 5 on the starting lineup, and like on the roster, it's like 5 players from every team just going.
And if you think about it, like, not every team had a bunch. Like Purdue had 2. So that means that's 2 total of their whole roster. So that means
some teams are just mass exodus.
Correct. Yeah. Yes, like Indiana State, who lost their entire starting lineup to the transfer portal.
I don't really know how mid-majors can be successful in today's landscape. I mean,
I think we talked about the whole thing, and before we wrap it up, we talked about whether or not it's feasible for a portal team to a team composed mostly of portal starters, let's say it that way, would be able to gel enough to be able to win a national championship. I don't think you're going to have the mid-majors that are going to be upsetting a bunch of places as much, because like Indiana State, we both thought they should have been in the tournament. We both thought that. I even went on the record.
At least wanted them to be. They're so fun
to watch. Well, according to the metrics, they should have been. They're the first team ever. They're the highest rated team ever to not make it.
Yeah.
I forget what the ratings were, but they were a top 30 team and they didn't make it. They were the first one to ever do that. But we thought, I even went on the record prior to the tournament and said, look out for Indiana State. They could make a run to the second weekend, depending on their draw. And here we are talking about they made the NIT and their entire starting lineup is no longer at Indiana State.
Mm-hmm.
That is what's going to happen to mid-majors anymore, because mid-majors can't do the NIL anymore, or to the extent that the big programs can. And you know what? I don't damn those kids for wanting to make money. You know, if I had a job that was offered to me that made 3 to 4 times more than I make right now, guess what? I'm leaving tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
The real problem with it is, again, we have really bled over into pay for play instead of just true NIL. Like,
correct.
True NIL, it was supposed to be like you sign some autographs, you get paid for your name, you get paid
Johnny Manziel style,
like,
where he got suspended for a half because he's signed autographs.
You could be in a commercial, you can be in video games, you can have your jersey sold, whatever. Like, that was the spirit of it, and it's turned into just an auction style every offseason of, hey, I got 1 million over here, 1 million over here, 1.2, 1.2, 1.3. Can I get a 1.4? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's,
and this isn't me being a Purdue fan knocking on IU, but the guy, the kid from Arizona, I forget his name.
Umar Ballo.
Yeah, the rumor was he was from the gate. Well, an AJ Store too, 1.2 right out of the gate. Whether he got that or not, that's not. But he was saying, I need 1.2. Well, that's for play then. That's pay for play. That's not. Hey, my face is worth it. It's what I can do on the court is worth $1.2 million.
Mm-hmm.
That's pay for play. That's not name, image, and likeness.
It's just a wild landscape we're currently under. But I do want to point this out too before we close, and maybe this is a good punctuation for this.
Yes, sir.
I do believe, because I think, I mean, like I said before, when the transfer portal is made up of this many guys, where you're talking almost half of college basketball being in the portal, I do think you have to pay attention to it if you want to succeed. Now, I'm not saying you have to overturn your roster every year. I do think, though, like, that's too large of a thing to ignore. Mm-hmm. But I also don't believe it's going to be to this size forever. I think it was Kevin Sweeney who tweeted out recently that this is the last year of COVID players. And so
they had that extra year to play with.
Yes. And so we're seeing a lot of that going on too. And so next year, the sheer volume will drop down some, because we're getting rid of the 5-year guys from that. And so I think things, I'm not saying it's going to go back to normal or anything like that, but I don't believe we're going to see almost 2,000 players in the portal again. Just when you get rid of some more athletes just that are in that pool. And then it actually should put an emphasis back on some high school recruits, which I think have really been the ones who have been hurt through this process.
For sure. And a lot of, and I'm going to go to Purdue just simply because they had to, Mason Gillis and Ethan Morton had to leave because they had one more year of eligibility and they wanted to play, but they didn't have a spot on Purdue. They have 6 incoming freshmen, and I haven't honestly seen what Purdue decided to do with their roster, because they had to get rid of one of their scholarship players or have one of their recruits decide they were going to go prep for a year or to go redshirt, or some way of remedying that to where they had enough scholarships to have players. Mm-hmm. But that's going to be an exception to the rule anymore. Now is a team having to get rid of players because of their incoming freshmen. But I think you'll see more examples of that once you get the COVID years out of the way. And like you said, this is the last year for that. So those players are going to move on. There's going to be no people that have a 6th year of eligibility, because they get that one, they get 5 years to play 4. That's still the thing. Now they don't have 6 years to play 5.
So it'll be interesting. Like I do.
The portal may go down to 1,400 players, and we're going to go, wow, this is a low number.
What a light load this year, huh? That's oh, shoot. Well, again, that's this week's edition of Big Talk. Do want to thank everybody for joining us. And on the way out the door, Sam, tell everybody where they can find us.
All right. Well, we have the TikToks. I took it off. Then Tony and I talked, and he said that there are there were a couple of new posts that got put on. So I'm gonna talk about the TikToks, and I'll put it back on the graphic. But we've got the TikToks, the Instagrams, and the platform formerly known as Twitter. It is at B1G_talk. That's B1G, not BIG. Dalton, put that way up right there. You're number one. All right. Whenever you're typing it in, you're number one, or we're number one, whatever you want to talk. But at B1G_talk. Big Talk Facebook is B1G Talk. Big Talk. All Big Talk is not us. They're probably great people. I don't know them, but we are the awesomest, and we're at Big Talk. Every week we are on the ASAP Network. Every week Friday, 9 a.m. You know that already. But then if you miss the live stream, you can check it out later that day through Lounge Media Group. And if you want to watch the missed stream, go to Spotify. We'll have it there for you.
All right. So, like I said, that'll do it for another episode of Big Talk, college sports with a Midwest perspective, blue collar and blue blood. I'm Dalton Shetler. That's Sam Sprunger. Thanks again so much for joining us, and have a great weekend, everybody.
See ya.